Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look in this training module at how to create custom chart versus time graphical layouts within our VCM scanner software. So this is super important to spot trends for calibrating and tuning or for just data analysis. So chart versus time we can find can be down here on the lower portion of our screen. So depending on how you configure things on your screen, you might find that this is going to be at a different spot, but this is how I like to set up my screen when I'm going and using the scanner. Now we can find that we have 5 total layouts populated in our chart versus time. So we can see here there's a total of 5 tabs. Each tab can represent a different amount of information, different graphical plotting that you may want to go in and work with. So for example, in this first chart versus time, we have 5 lanes of data. If I go to the second chart versus time, we only have just a single lane of data and we only have a couple channels in here. So depending on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to overlay, it might make sense to have multiple lanes of data or just a single lane. It really depends. As we kind of poke through here, we're going to find that they're all set up a little bit differently. What I'm going to do here, so we can learn how to create a custom chart versus time layout, I'm going to get rid of the other pages that exist. Now, this particular layout, and when I'm speaking of a layout, I'm speaking of both the table layout up top here and the chart versus time. This is not for a Gen 3 Coyote. It looks like it's from the Gen 3 HP Tuners GM training course. So this is what populated when I opened my software to begin this training module. So I'm going to just edit from here and get rid of some of these tables, again, just for demonstration purposes. If you want to go in and take a look at what I've created for the training course in terms of the layouts for the table layout, the table overlays, and for the chart versus time, you can go up here to the file open layout, and move right into our Gen 3 course folder into the VCM scanner, and then you can go ahead and select one of these options for the custom layouts that I have available. So let's go in here and just start to get rid of some information. Let's go to our chart versus time. Let's get rid of some of these other tabs. We're going to bring it down to a singular tab, and then I'll talk about how to bring in a second chart versus time, which is definitely a little bit odd. And I'll show you how to navigate that and get a second chart versus time, or a third, or a fourth, or 10 of them. Doesn't matter. You could populate a ton of them down here depending on what you want to see and work with. Okay, so now we're down to a singular chart versus time. What I'm going to do right now is open a data log that I've previously captured that's going to be available in our training course folder. I'm going to open that up so it's populating channels that are going to be pertinent for our Gen 3 application. So stuff that I've actually data logged with our 2022 Mach 1 Mustang here, so we can take a look at a few things. Because what we can plot in our chart versus time is going to be the PID channels that we are capturing over here in our channels list. Now, in this case, if I open up the data log, we'll find that probably almost nothing is going to populate because these channels found in my chart versus time are for a GM application, and those channels don't correspond to any of the PID logging channels for a Gen 3 Mustang. So we're going to have to go and completely reconfigure what we have in our lanes of data here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to File Open, and I'm going to move in here to Desktop, and then I'm going to go in here to our Gen 3 course folder, and then go in here to Data Log Files. Now there's a ton of files in here. I'm going to open up this very first file. We can see all stock warm startup, free rev, decel back and idle. So this is when the car was completely stock, just testing things out, making sure the logging was working and all that kind of information. So let's go to open here. So now what we find is that I have these channels that are going to be specific for my Gen 3 application. Now what's important here is that whatever I'm logging in my channels list is what I can build my chart versus time with. If we take a look, if I'm just kind of going back and forth here, notice, let's go in here and just use the zoom out button. We see that certain channels are populating. So for example, engine RPM populates, the mass airflow reading populates, spark timing populates, and it looks like the short-term fuel trims populate. That's channels from a Gen 3 GM that would also be relevant for a Mustang application. So some of the data is going to transfer and populate, but notice we have a lot of missing channels, and that's because these channels don't correlate or are not being data logged in the logging channels list. So when you're creating a chart versus time, make sure that you're logging channels in your PID channel list that you want to go in and plot into a chart versus time. A lot of times if I'm going in and I'm logging up specific PID channels, let's say for idle tuning, and I create a chart versus time for full throttle, maybe I'm doing some full throttle tuning and I want to overlay the direct injection high pressure versus the target, that wouldn't necessarily correlate to logging channels that I'm capturing in idle conditions. So we find that those channels would just be blank. Nothing's going to translate here in a chart versus time. So it's important that we understand populating all this. So what I'm going to do is, in order to start to modify this existing chart versus time, if we right click, we go to charts layout. This allows us to go behind the scenes and start to change the way that the chart versus time here is going to be set up and configure, and ultimately what we're going to graphically plot here in the chart versus time. So what we find is that we have up to 5 groups of information. So each lane represents the group. So group 1 here is going to correspond to RPM, speed, injector duty cycle. We can see those channels listed right here. And what it's going to plot within this graphical lane is all 3 of these channels. So if we take a look further here, click on this, we can see that RPM is one of the channels. The unit, obviously we can change the unit. We know we want to leave it on RPM for the unit. We have decimals, so this is going to be...
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.